Hey everybody, welcome back. Jorbs here. I'm talking through the 5 world record win streaks that I set on patch 2.2 since it came out. We've covered 8-0 on Ironclad, 9-0 on Silent, 10-0 on Defect. I also talked at some length about how I'm playing Watcher. I don't have a world record streak on Watcher on this patch, but I do have, I looked at a sample of games where I went 10-0. My last 10 games where I went 10-0 and talked about what I'm doing to win on Watcher so that during this video I don't have to explain Watcher from the start. You can go watch me talk about it for 2 3/4 hours whenever you'd like. So I'm going to talk about my rotating win streaks now, starting with 11, and depending on how long this takes I might do the 13 as well in this video, or maybe it's a second video. But before I get into this, I wanted to address why am I actually talking about win streaks? Because this is a question that comes up fairly often when people come to my channel and want to know how good at Slay the Spire I am. They generally actually ask me about my win rate, not my win streaks, which makes some sense. Maybe you might conceptually think the most compelling evidence that someone's good at Slay the Spire is that they have won 60 or more % of their runs on this patch, or something like that, right? And I have had a very good win rate in Slay the Spire in general over the course of my career, sure. I've never felt like other people have win rates on any character that are significantly higher than my win rate on that character if I buckled down and tried to win every run on that character for a while. I've just never ever felt like someone's ability on a character was out of my reach. But the thing is, I don't try to sit down and win as many runs as possible as I can on each character. So when you look at someone who has a very high silent win rate, for example, they may have dedicated themselves to playing 100 runs of Silent. They're trying really hard on every run before they started those 100 runs of Silent. They spent some time in spreadsheets and doing some analysis of their own to work out what strategy they thought was best on Silent, and then they're refining it to an extremely high level. They're spending lots of hours per run, and they're putting forward their best possible performance on Silent, which is awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And it's fair to say that they're playing Silent very, very, very well while they do that, right? The problem for me with that pattern of play for Silent, basically, is I don't think there's much point to playing the 100 runs. I think that for me, the time that I got better at Silent by doing that was when I sat down and looked at stuff in spreadsheets. And having done that, having a good understanding of Silent, I can just play a ton of runs of Silent, and I can limit test things. I can see, am I wrong about something? Let's try doing this time and see if that works. Let's try doing this time. My time spent playing runs is time for experimentation, it's time for having fun, and also I'm an entertainer. I'm a broadcaster. My priorities as a content creator are not just to be the highest win rate Silent player in the world over the last 100 years, 100 runs, sorry, which could be cool. Sure, I guess that could be okay. But my priorities as a content creator are entertain people, say hello, connect to people, be a reliable source of content. So if I wake up in the morning and I have a headache and I don't feel great, I don't want to be oof, I don't want to stream today because I need to be at my peak performance to play Silent. That's not my priority. Raise money for causes that I believe in, spread awareness for causes I believe in. These are the things that I want to do as a content creator. I don't want to spend a ton of energy refining a strategy that I've decided is good on Silent. I think that when you look at Trackmania, I use Trackmania twice in these videos now, but when you look at somebody playing Trackmania, one thing you'll see is them learning a track. And when they're learning a track, they're trying out all these different lines and stuff, and they're trying to find the fastest path through the track. And they'll crash a lot because they won't be used to taking a certain line, and they'll oversteer or understeer, or they won't realize exactly how this level of acceleration causes you to land after this jump, and so they'll corkscrew out of the jump and lose their run, stuff like that. So that's their process of learning how to do the run. And then if you see them compete, play competitively on that track, you're not going to see them try to perform at their absolute fastest, and you're not going to see them try to improve anymore either. They're not doing either of those things anymore. What you're going to see them doing is take the knowledge that they already have and refining it to consistently perform at a good level. And that's cool and there's value to it, but it's not what I want to spend a ton of time doing in Slay the Spire. I want to keep on improving the amount of knowledge that I have. If someone comes to me with a question like, hey, what do you think about taking Ragnarok in Act 2 to prepare for the Act 2 boss fight, I don't want to say, well, I don't think that Ragnarok's super good. I haven't been able to find a use for it, and in my last 100 runs of Watcher, my strategy has not believed that Ragnarok is good, so I haven't taken it very often, so I don't really have much experience to respond to you with. What I want to say instead is like, oh, I've tried playing Ragnarok lots of times, I have a very solid idea of how good or bad it is, here are my opinions, and tell them, right? That is a higher priority to me than refining my strategy over lots and lots and lots of runs. So because of that, I don't care very much about my win rate. It is not my goal to have a particularly high win rate. What I do instead to prove that I'm very good at the game is I try to have win streaks where I have a period of like 20 to 30 hours of gameplay where I really dial in and try really hard and perform the strategies that I believe at the time to be the best on the character and try to set win streaks. And I've done this very successfully. But, you know, a lot of people aren't sure how relevant that is, right? So you won 13 runs in a row on Defect. I haven't done that. 10 runs in a row on Defect. What does that prove about your win rate? Does that actually prove that you're good? And I threw up a poll on Twitter. These are both results that I had at the beginning of this year. I played a set of 60 runs where I run 44 of them, which is very, very, very good, definitely. And I played 13 runs where I won 13 of them. That's another thing that happened. We're going to be talking about... No, we're going to be talking about... Actually, the 11-run rotating win streak was part of the 60 runs where I run 144. The 13-run win streak was not. So we're going to be looking at runs from the 44 out of 60 period. So I asked what people thought was more evidence that I have a greater than 65% win rate, basically. Because I think at this point in the history of Slay the Spire, having a greater than 65% win rate is a pretty good benchmark of excellence at the game. I think like 60 to 70% is a pretty reasonable place to say that very, very good players of the game Slay the Spire are at right now. Probably possible to push that even higher. Watcher, of course, sits above 90%, I think, with good play, so you have a decent amount of room for Silent, Ironclad, and Defect to be a little bit below 65%, and I think 60% is probably achievable in all three of the characters. Consistently, mind you. Not just like over a small sample or whatever. So, okay, cool. So over half of the people who responded to my poll asking which of these pieces of evidence they thought was greater for proving that I have a higher than 65% win rate. And yeah, over half of the people said that 44 out of 60 was better. Some of them even said that it was more than 10 times better than 13 out of 13. And like a quarter of the people said 13 out of 13 was better, and 10% said it was over 10 times better. So I think that's really interesting The math on this is very complicated, and depending on your prior beliefs about things and whether somebody's going to like state in advance these are the runs which you look at and then do exactly 60 runs or exactly 13 runs, changes the answer a lot. Some math to think about that I think is pretty powerful is if I do have a 65% win rate and I do 60 runs and win 44 times, the chance of me winning 44 or more times is actually 11%, which isn't high, obviously. I mean, if we're saying that I have a 65% win rate and this is an example of me winning more than 65% of the time, so obviously it's not going to be high. But 11% is generally not even considered statistically significant if you're looking at a like frequentist interpretation of a statistical trial. Usually you'd want something that was like, you'd want a p-value of less than 5% or possibly even more significant than that to really care about a result. So this is probably not incredibly great evidence that somebody has more than 65% win rate. If you look at 13 out of 13, the chance of somebody winning 13 or more runs in 13 instances is 0.37%. So this is, the 44 out of 60 thing is about 30 times as likely as the 13 out of 13 thing, which is a large amount. Now there are lots of problems still. There's sample size, there's how long it takes to do this thing. Somebody could try to win 13 out of 13 lots and lots and lots of times in short succession, whereas somebody who's trying to get more than 44 wins in 60 is going to take longer to play those 60 runs, which I think is actually one of the advantages of going for win streaks instead of going for large samples. And there's all sorts of stuff to consider. I'm not going to name names. You can get on my Twitter and see stuff, but I'm going to allow people anonymity. But this is Python, right? This is a script looking at if you play 400 runs, what's your chance of getting a streak of 13 or greater with different win rates. And in 400 runs, it's like 18.3% or so if you have a 60% win rate. So definitely not impossible at all. And if you're looking at a chance of getting a greater than 70% win rate in 40 runs, the chance of getting a greater than 70% win rate in 40 runs if you actually truly have 60% win rate is 13%. So for this stuff, with the numbers that we chose to plug in this instance, if you're going to play 400 runs, which is about as many as I've played on 2.2, it's actually about as likely for you to hit a 13 streak once or one or more times as it is for you to hit a greater than 60, a greater than 60% win rate over the course of 40 runs in a pre-declared sample. So in terms of that, these things are actually pretty similar in value. They're, somewhat comparable. The difference between pre-declaring a sample of 40 runs and getting 60 or more % win rate versus playing 400 runs and having a streak of 13 or greater somewhere in those 400 runs, they're about equally significant evidence of having a greater than 60% win rate. So that's cool. That's more math. The trick here, in my opinion, is I don't think that the math actually matters all that much. The reason that I think that having set 5 world record streaks in patch 2.2 and having set like 15 world record streaks over the course of my career is strong evidence that I'm excellent at Slay the Spire, is that other people have been trying to do it too and haven't done it. And I have, right? So maybe, I guess it's possible that I'm just incredibly, incredibly lucky. And maybe you could think that and think, oh, the sample sizes just aren't great enough. We don't have very much confidence that Jorbs isn't getting very lucky. Other players might be getting unlucky too. So this isn't great evidence that Jorbs is super great at Slay the Spire. But you're abstracting at this point so far away from what's actually going on when people play Slay the Spire and play win streaks. You're boiling it down to this binomial probability exercise, which it really isn't. When you play a win streak in Slay the Spire, when you are at 10-0 and you've dedicated 30 hours to getting to this point, and you have been putting all of your brain power into these runs, and I've played this game for over 5,000 hours, and I have tens of thousands of hours of experience in related games, in related studies. So when I put my brain into playing a run of Slay the Spire, it is exhausting. It is a lot of work. It is very hard for me to leverage everything that I have in my brain into a run of Slay the Spire. It's just a lot of work. Keep in mind that I'm also running a live show at the same time. This is a ton of work, and it's a ton of work for me, and it's a ton of work for other people who are trying to achieve a very long streak in Slay the Spire. When you're at that point and you're like offered the choice between two paths, being able to make the correct choice still is difficult. It's difficult to trust yourself. It's difficult to play at the highest level and not make mistakes for that long. It's just really hard. And I believe very strongly that I'm good at that. I try to be good at that. And other people who I think are good at Slay the Spire are good at that and try to be good at that. And those of us who are setting world records are doing an incredible job of proving that we're incredibly good at the game, right? And so for me, the 13 out of 13 is always going to be more significant because it's the thing that people are competing to do. I know how hard it is, how challenging it is, how emotional it gets, how soul-crushing it can be. And the 44 out of 60 just is barely a blip on my radar. I just do not care very much at all. For me, that feels like, yeah, if I play hundreds of runs and I try to have a period where I have a higher win rate than usual, it's going to happen. Whatever. So I think these two things are less things that you should actually analyze statistically and more things that you should analyze in terms of how many people are trying to achieve this and who's succeeding at it. Yeah. And that's basically the argument for streaking as a measure of excellence in games like Slay the Spire and other roguelikes. It's that lots of people are trying to do it, and the people who succeed at doing it are doing something very impressive. And also it's the like ease of access, how easy it is for somebody to come into the community and try to beat you. They're not going to have to play hundreds of runs to establish that their win rate is truly higher than everybody else's and they didn't just get lucky, because there is an intrinsic respected value to winning a certain number of runs in a row, which you appreciate it as an achievement in the same way that like somebody climbing a mountain that's higher than any mountain that anybody else has climbed is seen to have achieved something and to be a great mountain climber, even though maybe somebody else has been climbing lots of lower mountains and they have better cardiovascular health and whatever. Like maybe that's true, right? But this is an achievement with intrinsic value, which is impressive. And the 10-0 world record for rotating for Slay the Spire stood for a year before I broke it in January. So this is not only like an impressive achievement, but lots of people tried to do this and failed for quite a long time before I succeeded. The history of the rotating world record in Slay the Spire is, I believe, it gets hazy way back when. A few people have been asking, like, are the world records tracked somewhere? And the answer is not really. Like, they get declared on subreddits and things, but there are awkward things with world records where, like, different people play with different mods. Sometimes people are, like, resetting fights, which is really not okay, but they try to claim a world record even though they are. Sometimes people are having different opinions about which bugs are okay to use and stuff like that. So this is more about like saying I've done this thing and I've done it in the way that I play the game and I think it's awesome, than about saying, oh, I'm the best in the world and I'm better than other people, types of things. And when other people break 10-0 barriers and stuff like that, I get really excited and happy for them because it's just a really awesome achievement in Slay the Spire. So anyway, the history of the Slay the Spire world record as I remember it is I set 4-0 rotating back when the game had Ascension 15 only and didn't have Watcher, I want to say. And then 5-0 rotating was set by... God, was it Markheim? An excellent Russian Slay the Spire player, if I remember right. I set 6-0. These are back in the before times. 6-0 was before Watcher existed still. Win rates at that point were in the high 20 to mid 30%, basically, was where you were looking for good players, and I was able to like push up to 40% on Ironclad sort of and churn through some really tough runs to get 6. And then, you know, Watcher was released and things started to get out of control. Crimson Blur set 8, and Crimson Blur was doing an incredible job with win streaks in like the early parts of 2020. He set 8, I set 9, he set 10 like 2 days later or something. And then that 10 stood for about a year. And that's where we are when I start this win streak. We're on patch 2.2. 10-0 by Crimson Blur has stood for pretty much a year, but it's sort of in the air that that win streak's going to break at some point soon. 2.2 has buffed Silent a tremendous amount, and in general, there have just been buffs to the characters overall. And so even without considering that we are getting better at the game, this patch is easier than previous patches. And so once people learn this patch, there's an expectation that world records start to fall. And that's where we're at. I didn't play a ton of 2.2. I was playing Among Us in the latter parts of 2020 mostly. I have already set an Ironclad and Defect world record on this patch as I entered January, and in January I just like wanted to play a ton of Spire. So I sat down, I said I'm gonna beat the heart as many times as I can in January. I managed 127, which I'm very pleased with. And while I was in that like zone, it took me a while to adapt to playing runs really fast. I was trying to play runs in an hour to an hour and a half instead of my normal 2 to 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours was pretty normal for me at the time. And so I had to rework how I was thinking about Slay the Spire to be able to make decisions quickly enough. I had to reconfigure which sorts of lines I was looking for, because if you have another 3 hours to analyze a run of Slay the Spire, you're going to be able to save some health here and there. But if you're trying to beat runs in under an hour and a half, you're more inclined toward finding lines that are good enough and doing so quickly. I'm not saying that I played terribly or anything, I'm just saying I didn't play quite as well for the first half of this month as I would have if I was spending longer on the runs. But a nice thing about getting tons of repetitions in Slay the Spire is that you learn a ton about it. And this is a new patch, so I'm playing tons and tons of runs. I'm waking up and playing this game for 10 hours plus every day. I'm starting to get really comfortable with what's going on. Everything's fresh in my memory. And as I entered the mid part of January, I was just really dialed in. I was still relatively fresh. The exhaustion from the challenge hadn't quite hit yet. And I knew a lot about how different characters were working and stuff. One of the greatest challenges of the rotating world record is that you have to rotate through the characters. So you have to prove your excellence on all 4 of the characters at the same time. You don't get to be someone who's sat down and done a spreadsheet for Silent and then is executing and refining a strategy you believe to be best for Silent for 100 runs. Because after your Silent run, you play Defect. So you need 4 times as much stuff in your brain at the same time. And it's hard to gather that much stuff for your brain on a new patch, and it's also hard to keep it fresh. If you're not playing the characters, you start to have your intuition about what's right on them decay, at least in my experience. And so here I am playing a ton of Spire, and we hit a defect run on the 17th of January, which, I mean, there's no reason at this point for me to think, oh, this is going to be the start of something incredible. I'd actually lost the previous 3 runs going into this. But we hit a defect run, and this is actually a really fun defect run. If I remember right, the runs in the rotating world record streak were actually like pretty unique and cool a lot of the time, whereas the runs in the single character streaks felt like they were very consistent and regular. And maybe some of that is because I'm focusing on all 4 of the characters, which means I don't have quite the ability to dial in a specific strategy for each individual character, and so I'm getting more creative with them. I don't know. I couldn't say, but doing something pretty difficult, and it's fun to see how it worked. So, we start our defect run. I boss relic swapped. I spoke about defect a lot in the defect world record video that I recorded. At this point, I'm still liking boss relic swap a decent amount. We start ball lightning cool headed over white noise and beam cell. I think is fine, especially with a ball lightning already to have a lot of damage. And I took tempest on floor 5, which is just because I needed more damage. Maybe if I'd taken beam cell over cool headed, I wouldn't be in this spot, but I just wanted to make sure that I could kill elites, and I hadn't been offered good damage. And this happens to Defect. Defect doesn't have that many solid damage cards. Defect's advantage is that its good damage cards are really good. Like, they're almost worth 2 attacks when you find them. Ball Lightning is so much damage for a 1-cost common. Doom and Gloom is so much damage as AoE. But you don't always find them because there aren't that many of them. And so sometimes you do have to get creative with how you're going to deal damage. You have to take the Streamline, you have to take the Sweeping Beam. And here I decided I had to take a Tempest in order to survive against our elites coming up. So I immediately upgraded Tempest, and the idea is just to play it for a ton of damage in the fight. We kill some sentries, take a Birdface turn, take a Consume. It's also, like, maybe if I was in a situation where I was playing 100 runs of Defect, I would think Tempest is just such a bad card. I'm strong enough to get through elites with, like, Cool-Headed and Ball Lightning, so I should just do that. But it's also worth noting that I'm not really doing that. At this point, at the very start of a streak, I'm still in my I am trying to devour all of the knowledge about Slay the Spire as I can, as quickly as possible, to become the best player that I can be. And so that's one of the reasons that you see me taking Tempest on floor 5. Even if maybe I would have done it again later, I'm much more likely to do it when I'm not on a streak, because it's an opportunity to play a defect run that's a little bit different from what I'm used to and see how it flows. So we get Birdface Urn and Consume from the sentries, and we're already in incredibly good shape at this point. We have Focus and we have Sustain. Sustain, especially strong Sustain like Birdface Urn, is very good for Defect, because Defect's primary problem is not scaling, it's staying alive on turn 1 and 2. Scaling is something that you can be fairly certain you're going to get enough of on Defect as long as you see a good number of card reward screens. But staying alive is not something that you have that guarantee for. So Sustain is something that is very, very good at making you better at staying alive. Bites are very good on Defect for a similar reason. Especially, you couple... Some of these Sustain relics are better the longer that you can stay in fights. Birdface Urn, Bites are, I guess, not a relic, but they're a type of Sustain. And when you couple that with the fact that Defect is incredibly good at creating passive block by like turn 3 or 4 of fights, these ways to heal that benefit from being in a fight for a long time get very, very, very powerful in Defect. Because I can not only play all of my powers for Birdface Turn, in easy fights I can like play a creative AI and let powers generate to just full heal from Birdface Turn. Or if I have Echo Form in an easy fight, I can try to play the Echo Form before my other powers. And I can scale so strong against some enemies that I can safely do that, and then I can play the other powers twice and get twice as much healing. So Birdface Turn is great. We upgrade our Consume, we get a Fossilized Helix, so our starting relics are excellent, excellent, excellent here. Vital Lagavulin and get Akabeko, which, like, I'm actually pretty okay with. Good with Sweeping Beam if we get one at some point, but also just help to kill enemies before they kill us is nice. Took a Reinforced Body over Streamline and Rainbow. Really the thing that's significant here is that I took it over Rainbow. I think this is fine. Defect likes to have a good block card added to the deck pretty early, and Reinforced Body is certainly a good block card. You also consider that I already have a Tempest in the deck, and there are some synergies which like X-Cost cards, which are now more powerful because I have 2 X-Cost cards. For example, Recycle is a much more powerful card to pick up now that I have 2 X-Cost cards. We upgrade Cool-Headed, we get Skim and Duplication Potion from Alaus, we grab a Go for the Eyes from Exordium Wildlife Fight. Go for the Eyes, it's okay. Especially with card draw, which I have. I have Cool-Headed, I have Skim. Actually upgrade Go for the Eyes for the Hexaghost fight and to prepare for Act 2. And get an Electrodynamics from Hexaghost. So we should be pretty safe in Act 2 off the Electrodynamics, and stuff is all grooving here. With Defect, with Ectoplasm, we're actually pretty upset about Ectoplasm on Defect. We really like store relics like Orange Pellets, Clockwork Souvenir, Runic Capacitor in our Defect runs, and also stores are very good for finding the power type scaling that we need for late game. I think the last time I looked, if I remember right, it was something like an 18 or 22% chance to go to a store and see power type scaling for late game in a Defect run. Whereas Hallway Fight card rewards were about an 8% chance to see it. I believe that's right. I'm not sure exactly which cards and relics I was looking at for those numbers, but that's sort of the vague thing that I have in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you have like in the vicinity of 25 to 30 card rewards plus 2 or 3 stores over the course of a run, which is generally going to be enough to find at least 1 or 2 of your hits. You'd be, like, on average, you would be finding 3 or 4, but all you really need to do to win is find 1 or 2. So we get a Runic Pyramid, which is excellent, also very good with our X-Cost cards. Now Recycle's even better. We can think about combining Recycle and Tempest with Reinforced Body to block for a tremendous amount, especially if we find a Calipers later or something. Early Steam Barrier. With Runic Pyramid, the 0-cost stuff gets a little bit more valuable because you can't discard cards at the end of turns. You want to make sure that you're able to draw 5 every turn, which means sometimes you want a 0-cost card in your hand you can just play to get it out of the way. Got a Capacitor, which is excellent, a little bit more power scaling. Events like the Library and Match and Keep and stuff are another wild card in the math for how likely you are to find these sorts of cards. Library is great, just an excellent chance to see one of them. We get Turbo from the City Muggers. Love to have a Turbo in my Runic Pyramid deck. Love to have a Turbo in most decks, and especially my Runic Pyramid deck. And we're just grooving here, get a Preserved Insect and another Turbo, and I think we're pretty comfortable to just draw the rest of the Elephant at this point. I don't think anything's going to give us much trouble. We already have like Capacitor, Consume, Scaling, plus Bird Face Turn, and Fossilized Helix, plus good block, and an Electrodynamics. Like, what really is there left? I took another Tempest at the beginning of Act 3. This makes some sense when you couple it with Electrodynamics. But I think, Electrodynamics and Turbo even. Like, it's okay, right? It's maybe not necessary, it's maybe not incredible, but it does the thing that it does, and it does it okay. Get a Defragment Plus here. I actually took 50 damage from Nemesis and left the fight at full health. This is the power of Bird Face Turn, especially coupled with Creative AI. Did I have Creative AI at this point? I think I did there, didn't I? Nope. I don't know where I got Creative AI, but I guess I got it somewhere. Another Turbo. We get Bias Cognition from Reptimancer. Now we're just absolutely cruising. Bottle Tornado. Presumably hit Echo Form. And that's the run. Managed to take 79 damage against the heart. which is impressive. It's more than my max HP. I suspect that that was largely on turn 2 and 3, because I don't think this deck takes any damage after turn 2 and 3. So, yeah. Sometimes that'll happen. With a fossilized Helix, that implies that we get quite unlucky. Like, we had to not only have bad draws for turn 2 and 3, but also have the multi-attack happen first to clear my buffer charge and stuff like that. Alright, run 2 of the streak. Still not really thinking any differently from usual. There's nothing particularly special about winning one run, like, whatever. We're just gonna play a Watcher run and see what happens. In this month, the great thing about Watcher is that she's easier to win with than the other characters, for sure. And so a lot of people look at me trying to win 127 times in 1 month and say, why not just play Watcher all the time? And it's sort of a moot question because I'm trying to do it while rotating through the characters, so it's like not part of the rules that I've set for myself anyway. But also, Watcher's runs take longer than the other characters. Like, Watcher has a higher win rate than Ironclad, but Watcher takes twice as long to win with, sorts of things. So it's not even clear that Watcher is better time spent for winning lots of runs over the course of a month. I think my norm for playing Watcher during this month was to just sort of vibe a lot. Like, Watcher was sort of chill time for me. I wasn't focused anywhere near as much on the run. I'm expecting the power of the character to carry me through more often than not, by far, and I want to spend my brain power largely on Silent and Defect, I would say. I think those are the characters where, for me, during January, I felt like brain power application was giving me the largest edge. I sort of phoned it in on Ironclad during this run. I had been winning like 70% of my Ironclad runs leading up to this, and then I just did absolutely atrociously for the first quarter of the challenge on Ironclad. Like, I just couldn't win a single thing. I felt like my prior beliefs about what was good on Ironclad just were getting punished over and over again, and I was trying to adapt to do something different, but wasn't able to find it. Probably I just got lucky before I played this challenge with Ironclad and got unlucky while I was playing this challenge with Ironclad. But the end result in a situation where I'm playing 12 hours a day was I sort of like accepted that something was probably going wrong, something wasn't quite lining up, and decided, okay, I'm just going to do my best, but I'm going to focus more of my brain power on Silent and Defect, where I feel like I have a good idea of how to refine and optimize, and I'm going to see payoffs for that. Whereas Ironclad felt like a bit more of a mess to me during January. But yeah, for Watcher, I'm mostly just vibing. So, how did this run go? I took Flying Sleeves, Sash Whip over Bowling Bash Third Eye, cool. Carve Reality over Ragnarok Just Lucky, cool. Is this a Hexaghost deck? Yeah, so I really like taking Carve Reality against Hexaghost. I just feel like you need the ability to deal 250 damage against Hexaghost, and if you don't take attacks that deal a large amount of damage, that can be pretty hard. So like, Just Lucky is a cool card, sure, but it doesn't deal 18 damage like Carve Reality does. And when you couple that with maybe Vulnerable and Wrath, Carve Reality all of a sudden is dealing 54 for one card, which is going to add up to 250 pretty quick. But a Golden Idol, a Lizard Tail, and a Bowling Bash off of Gremlin Knob. Bowling Bash versus Crush Joints is interesting. There have been times in my career, I think, where I would have taken all three of these cards. I'm definitely at a point where I do not think Wave of the Hand is very important anymore. I used to think it was one of the very important Watcher cards, but, you know, come a long way. Bowling Bash and Crush Joints are like... Basically, my opinion of Bowling Bash has gone up over time, whereas my opinion of Crush Joints has stayed about the same. So I'm at a point where I really like that Bowling Bash here at this point. Interesting that I took a Sash Whip over it on floor 3. I guess Sash Whip's the better card against Lagavulin and Gremlin Knob, which is 2/3 of your elite fights. But then once I've already fought Gremlin Knob, now my next elite fight is going to be Sentries or Lagavulin. And so we're 50% that we're living in a world where Bowling Bash is very, very good. Upgraded Sash Whip and Flying Sleeves for 18 damage. Walk into an elite fight with 20 health and take 17 damage. We get a Thread Needle, a Blasphemy. Good stuff. I think that this is sort of worst case scenario for this elite fight probably, and I have a Lizard Tail already. So it's really fine to be walking into this fight and getting close to dead, because I'm pretty sure that we don't usually take this much damage, and even if we do take lots of damage, we just use Lizard Tail. It's not the end of the run. We want to be able to get that Thread and Needle and that Blasphemy out of this floor. If we don't take the elite fight, we're not going to be getting Thread and Needle and Blasphemy, and so we're going to be far, far, far weaker for the rest of the run. Grab a rest, purchased Foresight and Meditate, and removed a Strike. God, I love that store. That store just makes the deck so much stronger. Skipped a second Foresight off of this card reward, unfortunately. Also skipped Wave of the Hand. Took a Fear Potion, which is going to be helpful for Hexaghost. Grabbed a Talk to the Hand and upgraded it, and we fight Hexaghost on 8 HP and take 2 over 9 turns. So, good Act 1. Looks like I took a Sacred Bark as my boss reward. Talked about this a lot while looking over my watcher runs. Don't really feel like the character needs a 4th energy, so a lot of the time taking these no downside boss rewards is going to be pretty exciting for me. I'm generally pretty happy about it. I could Consecrate here, I guess a little bit of help for AoE fights, although I'm not sure that I need it with Thread and Needle and Bowling Bash already. I'm not 100% convinced that that's right. I think we're a little bit low on Wrath stat stuff too. I'm not sure that we have any of it yet, so making it so Eruption's a smaller part of the deck seems like it's costly. We can Weave and Protect. Maybe my thinking is I only have one source of Wrath, so I really need help making my deck stronger, which means I just have to take above average cards right now. Maybe that was where my brain was at. I'm also taking 0 cost stuff because I only have 3 energy, which is, like, fine. Consecrate's a perfectly good card. Just Lucky is a perfectly good card. These cards are completely fine. Got another Meditate from the library, so I have 2 of those now. Meditate's a very nice card to combo with Eruption if you don't have access to other ways into Wrath. It's a way to guarantee the Calm to Wrath combo, plus get back your Eruption, so it feels like you have more copies of the Wrath card in your deck overall. I took a Deus Ex over Lesson Learned. Did I get Lesson Learned from the Whale? I must have gotten Lesson Learned from the Whale in this run. Because all of my cards are upgraded and I have a Lesson Learned, right? So, and I skipped it there. I must have had Lesson Learned from the Whale here. That also sort of helps me to understand why I'm playing the run the way I am. It makes more sense that I'm taking defensive cards, given that I have Lesson Learned. I want to be able to stay in fights long enough to play it. It also makes more sense that I'm taking, like, mediocre cards that are good right now, because there's a reasonable expectation my deck will be very, very, very strong if I just stay alive for a while. So yeah, that all makes sense. I did not take Flurry of Blows here. I guess I'm very bad at stance shifting. Meditate's not that good with Flurry of Blows because it ends your turn, so you don't get Flurry back. Still a little bit surprised that I didn't take Flurry though. The card's incredibly good. And I took a Wave of the Hand over Sands of Time and Meditate. I'm not sure that's correct either. Lots of things here where I'm, like, not really convinced. We eventually get Tantrum on floor 31 though, so I think now the run's just over. Got an Omniscience from the Collector. Take a Black Star on floor 34. Finally get some relics out of it. I think it tends to be good at the end of Act 2 because Act 3 tends to be very easy. Going through Act 3, yeah, and the upside you're getting from the extra 3 or 4 relics over the course of the run is going to be more significant than what most other boss relics would give you at the end of Act 2. Very quick draw the rest of the elephant once we get through the dangerous stuff in Act 2 in this run. Pretty normal stuff for a Watcher run. Alright, cool. So Ironclad, boss relic swap, I hit Snecko Eye. This felt like the only way I could ever win with Ironclad at this point. I didn't even do that badly on Ironclad, right? I was like slightly below 50% over the course of the 30 days. And you consider that I'm playing for 10 hours a day, I'm trying to complete the runs in like an hour. It's not that bad. to be around about 50% Ironclad under those conditions. But I felt like I was doing really, really bad on Ironclad. So I would have been very happy to see this Neko Eye. I was probably like still not that convinced by it. Like an Iron Wave was a decent bridge card. I think that's completely fine. Clothesline, True Grit, all this stuff is fine. Flame Barrier is excellent. Purchased a Reaper at the Merchant, so now we're like Sneko Eye plus Reaper. Some sort of snowball is going to happen, and we're going to very easily win the run, I imagine. I Feel No Pain and a Gremlin Horn from Lagavulin seems fine. Upgrading Bash is fine. Not going to be the best against sentries, I guess, but I have a Feel No Pain, so that doesn't matter as much. I Feel No Pain and a Reaper, so I'm very excited to see sentries here. Oh, and I got a feed on floor 8 from Gremlin Knob, so this run is going to be a Reaper plus feed snowball from here, and I imagine that there actually already isn't very much to say. Like, this is just over. We have 2 Reapers and feed plus Sneko Eye at the end of Act 1, and we get a 4th energy. Let's see if I got close to dying off of Coffee Dripper in Act 2. Nope. Alright. This one's a wash. Cool. That was really interesting. Anyway, this is to go 4-0 now on Silent. I think like going 4-0 is a nice little mini accomplishment. I think I often try a little bit harder on my runs to go 4-0 just because it's like, it's sort of nice. You can call it like completing the rainbow or something. You won with all 4 characters in succession. Not that many people have done that in the history of Slay the Spire. Like, this is relative to winning 11 in a row. This seems like a very small achievement, right? But there are actually very, very few people in the world who have ever done this. So it's just pretty cool. It's a nice little thing to do. If you are looking for something fun to try, and you're someone who's got into Ascension 20 on all the characters and like beaten the heart once or twice with each of them, I'd encourage you to just try playing the game and seeing if you can win with each of them in succession, because it's fun. You play the characters one after another. You start to feel the pressure once you've gotten 2 wins in a row, like, oh my god, can I pull this off? Your last run is going to be feeling some mild version of what someone feels when they're like trying to go 10-0 on their win streak. Yeah, it's just a fun way to try to do something cool and Slay the Spire. So, you know, it's nice. I boss relic swap on Silent here, which is very unusual. When I boss relic swap on Silent, it means that the other whale bonuses were awful, and it also means that my pathing through the act is very multi-dimensional. Like, there's a path that would really benefit from getting very strong right now. There's another path that would be very safe to go through if I got like a runic pyramid and I wasn't that strong yet. Even Sneko Eye is a relic that isn't that strong on floor 1, but tends to get very strong very quickly. So even if you relic swap into Sneko Eye, sometimes you want to be able to take like 4 campfires and 1 elite instead of like 3 elites, 2 campfires, for example. Although if you get a dash from the first hallway fight, that completely goes out of the window immediately. Like, it doesn't take very long for Runic Pyramid or Sneko Eye to get strong if you're getting the right cards. Just a matter of how long it takes before you find the stuff that makes them really good. So anyway, I swapped into Busted Crown, which is not great. When you're playing a Busted Crown run, the value of your hallway fight and elite rewards goes down, right? You have to analyze this relic in a nuanced way. I have a video talking about the question card plus Busted Crown interaction. It used to be like a year ago, a lot of people would say, hey, you can take Busted Crown here, it's okay because you have question card. Question card mitigates the downside of Busted Crown. This is something that people used to say a lot, like over a year ago. And people have stopped saying it, fortunately, probably because I have ranted about how much I hate it for so long. But in a Busted Crown run, you're not trying to go to a lot of hallway fights, right? So in a Busted Crown run, question card doesn't really do that much because you're not trying to see a ton of card rewards because your card rewards aren't very valuable. What you're trying to do in a Busted Crown run is you're trying to build around like 1 or 2 very strong cards you manage to find, maybe getting lucky in a fight reward or maybe from a store or an event, and you're trying to get like lots of relics and other miscellaneous things that support that. An elite floor has a relic and lots of gold in it, so an elite floor is more valuable relative to a hallway fight, which doesn't have the relic and everything all the time. But I think it's even more obvious that that's true when you have a busted crown, because that relic becomes a more significant percentage of what the reward on the floor is. Similarly, events are much better relative to hallway fights when the hallway fights give 2 fewer cards in the card reward screen, so you're more excited to go to events. So actually, if I have a question card, I really don't want to take Busted Crown, because Busted Crown makes me want to go to events and stores a lot, and I don't get any value from question card if I do that. So it's like the difference between having something that mitigates the upside of something else and makes you like average and bleh, versus recognizing what's strong about your run and playing toward the strong thing and avoiding things that make the strong thing you're doing worse. Taking Busted Crown when you have a question card makes the strong thing that you're doing worse, which makes it harder for you to win. So anyway, floor 1, we grab a Poison Stab, that's great. We grab a Blade Dance from the store, that's also great. We're already doing pretty well. We grab a Bane, which combos okay with the Poison Stab. We've gotten pretty lucky, we've had 3 card rewards, well, a store and 2 card rewards, and we've gotten 3 good damage commons, which is mostly what Silent wants early on in the game. Actually got a Blade Dance from Living Wool as well. So for a Buster Crown run, we're having a great job adding stuff to our deck. Decided to skip Flying Knee, decided with double Blade Dance. Bane and Poison Stab, I was probably doing okay for early damage. And we kill Leg Villain comfortably, get a Sustain Relic and the Footwork, so that's really nice. Getting a Footwork, now, like, if we get a Duplicator event for that Footwork, we actually probably have enough defense for late game fights with any other reasonable stuff. So we're looking pretty good here, I would say. Get an Odd Mushroom and a Power Potion from an event. Mercury Hourglass, Dagger Spray is pretty good. Some AoE damage for Act 2 in particular. And I took Skewer from the Sentries, and I remember actually thinking quite a while about whether I wanted the Skewer or not, because most of the cards that I've selected so far in this run have turned energy into damage. So it's not something that my deck is really struggling to do. If I weren't playing a Busted Crown run, I would almost certainly not be taking Skewer on floor 11 here. But the nice thing about Skewer is that it can actually scale in pretty obscene ways off of relics, which means that adding Skewer to my deck gives me a bunch more. Imagine you're waiting at a train station and you need to catch a train in order to go to the end of the run to win, right? So you're waiting at this train station and seeing if the train comes and you can get on or not, and it doesn't come and that sucks and you lose the run. And then you go into your next run and you're like, fuck, well, I guess I'll wait at a different train station. And so maybe the first train station was, I'm going to build a poison build. And the second train station was, I'm going to focus exclusively on shivs. And you just got unlucky, like the accuracies didn't come up for your shivs, you didn't find catalysts for your poison build, it just didn't work out, right? Slay the Spire, though, is largely about working out how to wait at as many train stations as you possibly can. Like, you try to stand on the corner in between 4 different train stations, and then you listen for a train coming, and when you hear it, you sprint in that direction. That's sort of the experience of playing Slay the Spire. And so here, I'm in a situation where I'm like sort of waiting at the damage card train station. I have like the footwork, dexterity, block stuff going on to maybe connect. That's my connecting train to a solid defensive package that I can grab later. I'm stretching the analogy pretty far. But because I have Busted Crown, I don't have anywhere near as much confidence that these trains are going to show up. And Skewer's a train station that I can wait at that doesn't cost me that much, really, to add to my potential train stations. It's like pretty close to the Shiv train station. It likes Shuriken and Kunai in the same ways that Shiv's like Shuriken and Kunai, because you can play it for 0 to proc them, and it scales multiple times with Shuriken. And on top of that, Skewer also really likes things like Necronomicon and Chemical X, which I don't benefit from yet. If that train showed up, I'd be shit out of luck. But once I take the Skewer, that train's a straight ride to the Heart Fight and a 1-run. So that's largely what's going on there and why I'm taking Skewer. And you can use that train station metaphor for like every part of life if you want to. If you're trying to find a career that you're happy in, you can decide in advance that this is the only thing you could possibly be happy doing, and then sit there waiting for the opportunity to do that to arrive. You can even work toward the opportunity to do that to arrive, right? But another thing you could do is you could be like, I'm the sort of person who likes like these 4 or 5 sorts of things. I'm gonna put my feelers out and see if there are any great opportunities for me in those places. And if you find one, you jump aboard and commit, and you've found yourself a great career. You don't necessarily have to stay in the career forever. Maybe like 3 years later you decide you want to do something else. But yeah, that's the general mode of searching for and committing to an opportunity, which you can apply to like anything in life, but which works quite nicely here for Slay the Spire, I would say. So we get 5 health, we upgrade our Skewer. Nice thing about Skewer is it's a great upgrade, so we don't have to think super hard about what we're upgrading anymore. I also started with 4 energy with Busted Crowns, so lots of reasons to like it. Got a Courier from Gremlin. Courier is excellent because one of the ways that we can really scale a run with Busted Crown is to break stores in some way. If we get Courier plus Mind Bloom for 999 gold plus a membership card, for example, we can make up for the fact that we're not getting many card rewards by getting a ton of strength in our deck in a completely different way. Upgrade Neutralize for the boss fight because I haven't found any other weak, and we beat Hexaghost pretty nicely. And I ended up taking Calling Bell. I'm not sure what my other options were, but given that I already have 4 energy and I have a Busted Crown, it does make a good amount of sense that Calling Bell would be more strong than usual, because I'm not suffocated on energy in the same way, and I'm expecting to find Relic interactions in order to help me win the run. This gave me Juzu Bracelet, Ink Bottle, and Captain's Wheel, which are fine. In fact, Juzu Bracelet is probably at its best with Busted Crown, since we really don't benefit that much from hallway fights. I don't generally love Juzu Bracelet, but that's because generally hallway fights aren't that much worse than events, or might even be better than events. But we're in a situation here with Busted Crown where events are pretty comfortably going to be better than hallway fights most of the time. Skipping 2 Banes, 2 in a row, and we do get Chemical X on floor 20. So excellent use, and then on top of getting Chemical X on floor 20, we got Necronomicon on floor 21. So now all of a sudden, if we play our Skewer with 4 energy, we're actually playing it for 6 twice and dealing 120. So we've very rapidly gone from having a deck that is very fair in lots of ways to having a deck that is like ridiculously broken. And it's entirely because we took the Skewer and left that train station open for us, and the train showed up. Skipping Catalyst, taking a Vajra. This run snowballed very hard from that point and ended up being very quick to complete. You can see this is a 47-minute run, so part of that is because I'm trying to win as many... I went to 1 in the champ fight, oh my god. Part of this is that I'm trying to win as many runs as possible in a month, right? So I'm not gonna spend a ton of time thinking about decisions that don't seem worth spending a ton of time thinking about. But also, it's because most of these fights are actually just like block for a turn or 2 and then play Skewer and the fight ends. There just isn't very much going on here. We got the Wheel of Change, which gave us Decay. Thanks, Wheel of Change. We met Dawn on floor 37 for some gold, coupled with Courier. So this is a chance to get a really good soar coming up, and sure enough, we did. purchased a membership card, a tungsten rod, and I decided to go for an accuracy in this store, given that I had 3 blade dances after purchasing a blade dance and a burst. And so I end up with double accuracy, triple blade dance in my deck, which is going to be a way to supplement my skewer damage. But actually having done that, I got another skewer that was already upgraded on floor 46 just from Busted Crown deciding to bless me with that. So at that point, the shivs sort of didn't matter very much because I was just playing my skewers so often. And in the end, actually, I beat the heart by just like playing Akabeko'd skewer for 200 damage, playing the other skewer for 200 damage, using liquid memories to play a skewer for 200 damage, and then like drawing skewer again and dealing 200 damage with it or something like that. I just like basically played skewer every turn until the heart was dead. So pretty cool run, I would say. I think the run doesn't have a ton of super complicated lessons, but it does have 2 pretty unique lessons, rethinking about how you're going to win with Busted Crown, and also taking cards which are fairly low cost to add to your deck and have the potential to win you the run in the skewer pick. Alright, so we've done 4 in a row, we're back to defect. This is not a Boss Relic Swap defect run, so probably got some sort of strong whale bonus. All of these runs are on YouTube, by the way. If you search for World Record Streak, my 11-0 is there. My 13-0 is also already up, so you'll want to make sure you're watching the 11, not the 13. I think one's called like Ridiculous and another's called Ludicrous or something. Something like that. And presumably my faces are like... Yeah, I mean... I was talking earlier about my goals as a content creator, right? And one of my goals as a content creator is to be viewed as... One of my goals as a content creator is to make very, very good content. Another one of my goals as a content creator is for people who would benefit from seeing that content to actually see it. And so, thumbnails with faces and emotive expressions do very well on YouTube for discovery. It's sort of dumb, but the discovery system on YouTube is it shows you all of these thumbnails, and people tend to click on the ones with emotive faces. And it would make a lot of sense for YouTube's discovery system to be better. But it isn't, unfortunately. It's like a machine algorithm which is built based on very little understanding of what the content actually is. So it just doesn't have much ability to sensibly recommend content to people. And so we take pictures of our faces, we have big emotions on our faces, and then hope that people will click on our stuff so that they get to see the really sweet content. That's what we do. It's a bit weird, but that's the game, unfortunately. Hate the game, not the players. See if you can work out some way for YouTube to be better. I have 37 health after floor 1 in this run, so I must have taken a lot of damage to transform 2 cards or get a rare relic or something. I didn't get a rare relic because I found Bird Face Darn and the Scrap Ooze on floor 2, which is well done. I am, however, currently at 19 health on floor 2. That's a bit spooky. Got a Sweeping Beam from Jawworm, drank a regen pot, so we're doing a little bit better. Took 12 from Small Slimes, which is worse than average. And I actually took Hello World here over Barrage. Hello World is... It's not immediately obvious why Hello World would be good in any way. It's actually, like, pretty solid against both Hexaghost and Slime Boss, specifically, though. It's pretty good against Lagavulin and Sentries, too. I wouldn't say it's incredible against Sentries, but it's pretty good against Lagavulin. It's okay against Sentries. And this card actually does surprisingly well in a lot of late game situations, particularly ones involving trying to play stacks for lots of block. or trying to remove artifact charges in a deck that struggles to remove artifact charges, or just having a deck that has lots of energy but not much card draw and needing to play cards. One thing to keep in mind about Defect is that often by the time you're through your first draw pile, your deck is already set up to be very strong. You've already played your powers that give you more focus and stuff like that. And so you don't have that much fear of drawing bad commons the second time through your deck when you play Hello World, because the second time through your deck you're generally expecting is going to be pretty okay. You can think about the upside of it a lot more, which is that at the start of your turn you might put a stack into your hand with 15 cards in your discard pile, and all of a sudden you're blocking really well. Or you might put Go for the Eyes into your hand. If you look at Defect's commons, they're actually pretty good. You can find Cool-Headed and Cold Snap for Frost Orbs if you're low on those. You can find Recursion, which can be surprisingly nice once you're established in the fight, but which usually isn't really worth picking up because he's not very good on turn 1. Yeah, the commons tend to actually be quite okay. I'm not saying it's a great card at all, but the reason that I took it here is that I wanted some help for the elite fights that were coming up, and it's going to help a lot against Lagavulin and be pretty okay against Sentries, and I didn't think that Claw or Barrage were doing anything for me yet. I haven't found a way to add an extra orb yet, and I mean, Claw just never does anything, really, unfortunately. Sorry, Claw lovers in the YouTube comments. I apologize. So we go to a Merchant with 14 health and buy an Aurichalcum, a Regen Pot, and a Static Discharge, which is awesome. Also remove to defend. Looks like I paid a bunch of current HP for a bunch of gold. Yeah, I have 362 gold in floor 1. So we get our payoff. Aurichalcum's an incredibly good early game relic. It can even remain very good later on in the game for Defect in particular, because Defect has so many Frost Orbs. So if you have 3 Frost Orbs channeled and no block, you're going to proc Aurichalcum and all of the Frost Orbs and block for a lot. Regen Potion's obviously very valuable. Static Discharge is some good damage. We rest. We actually fight a pretty tough question mark fight. Get a Seek, Duplication Potion, and Odd Mushroom, which is very good card rewards. And then fight 2 elites in a row. Gremlin Knob is very commonly rough for Act 1 Defect. Managed to only take 27 damage thanks to Aurichalcum. Thanks, Aurichalcum. The Bag of Marbles, Sunder, and Essence of Steel. Sunder is a card that, barring good relic and other card interactions in your deck, will generally not be that great, but honestly Bag of Marbles is already enough of a relic interaction for it to be good enough for Act 1 and 2, I would say. And it starts to get really good sometimes in late game if you couple it with Echo Form or Necronomicon or Madness or Snecko Eye or Liquid Memories. There are just lots of things that interact with Sunder in ways that aren't game-breaking, but are pretty good. And so it's an okay card to have for sure. Not always going to be a super strong winner, but often going to be pretty good, and even in this worst case scenario, it's not so bad to be able to turn 3 energy into damage on your turn. That's a pretty nice thing to guarantee you'll be able to do. We get Ginger and Self-Repair from the Sentries. Self-Repair over Turbo, FTL, and Barrage. I do already have a Bird Face Turn, which you might think, oh, that makes Self-Repair not necessary, but more realistically, it just makes Self-Repair even better. So, seems fine. We upgrade Sunder at 20 HP. I believe I still have a Regen Potion, so this isn't as dangerous as it might seem. And then we fight the Sentries at this event, so we managed to take 2 events after floor 6 and got both of the good ones for Act 1, which is pretty awesome. Skipped Barrage, FTL, and Rebound. I wonder about skipping FTL there. I definitely wonder about that. Not sure that I would recommend skipping FTL there. The reason to skip FTL is you look at your deck and you think, I really want to take Choker and I really want to take Snekawai, and so I'm not going to take FTL. But don't I already have a Seek? Maybe that was last time. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe it's close, but my intuition would be you should probably be taking FTL here. It can auto shields over Recycle, Leap, and Compile Driver. I guess I just want a good block card, and auto shields often gets significantly worse than Leap later in the game, but in most of the situations where auto shields is worse than Leap later in the game, you're winning very comfortably, so it doesn't matter. Auto shields is going to be a better card than Leap for the next like 10 to 15 floors, which is when we really need it to be giving us good output. So it makes some sense to me. Consume gets us our focus, upgrade Static Discharge, and beat up Hexaghost. We do get Seek from Hexaghost. Maybe that's why I was thinking of Seek, because I saw it from Hexaghost. And I actually end up taking Black Star, so I'm like really missing FTL after taking Black Star. However, that having been said, I imagine that with all of our Sunders and Bags of Marbles and Orichalcums, and especially with our Bird-Faced Urn, we're going to be doing pretty well going through here. There's no Electrodynamics in the deck yet to make the elites really easy for us, but we rapidly get much stronger because we're taking 2 relics out of each elite fight, and they're not able to kill us. So by the time we're through Act 2, I think this run's already pretty much over. Yeah, not gonna... Oh, Giant Head deals us 63. Sometimes this happens with Defect and with Silent, actually. You have decks that just don't scale that well and are pretty slow, and other enemies can't punish you for it, but Giant Head in particular in Act 3 can be tough. So... yeah, actually looking at this, all I've got is the 1 Consume Plus at this point, I think. If I don't draw it in the right moments, it's not going to be enough for the Giant Head fight. Still though, we like take some damage and then we basically heal back off of our relics. Got an Apotheosis from Sensory Stone, which is nice. It's always funny to see these fights where you like take 20 damage and then leave the fight at full health. You can just imagine the bosses, like that comic where the adult has their hand on the kid's forehead and the kid is like trying to punch them. Feels very much like that sort of situation. Pretty comfortably won the end of the run. Got another Cool Headed and a Consume from the store, so we're just getting better and better at doing the thing that Defect does to win. Picked up a Data Disc at some point too. His Bag of Prep and Centennial Puzzle are really, really powerful. Cursed Key from the Act 2 boss, so we didn't end up being stuck on 3 energy forever. Alright, cool. Back to vibing with Watcher. At this point we're at 5-0. I don't really start to sweat it at 5-0 yet. I think when the record was 10, probably like 7-0 is when I start to really dial in. And keep in mind that this is during a time when I don't have extra energy anyway. So like, it would be nice to be able to dial in and play really well, but I can probably play really well for 3 to 4 hours a day. I can't do it for 10 hours a day. My brain will break. I will melt and turn into a small puddle on the floor of my office if I try to do that. So unless I'm planning on giving up my attempt to get as many heart kills as possible in the month, I'm just going to have to play these runs at like B level output. And you know, that's gonna have to be okay. That's pretty much what I did. So conclude, upgrade strikes defend is awesome. We get decay from Match and Keep. Thanks Match and Keep. Also got a brilliance though, which is like sort of nice. Carve Reality. This is a Hexaghost act again, so cool. Just Lucky from Small Slimes. I like Just Lucky. I fairly commonly take Just Lucky in Act 1. This is just a consequence of my belief that Watcher doesn't really need 4 energy to win runs, my belief that Watcher struggles most in Act 1 and 2, and Just Lucky is simply a pretty good card to help you with these problems. Also, Just Lucky is a good card for waiting at train stations. You get Kunai, all of a sudden Just Lucky is way better. You get Shuriken, all of a sudden Just Lucky is way better. You get Nirvana, all of a sudden Just Lucky is way better. There's so much stuff you can find that very rapidly makes Just Lucky a much stronger card. Goldeneye makes it scry more. Fasting makes it a very good card. You might get multiple copies of Fasting with an Orange Pellets. Orange Pellets, 3 times Fasting. Yeah, so, you know, there are lots of ways for this card to become good, and it's pretty good when you pick it too. 0 damage from sentries, get a Gremlin Horn, which is excellent. Sometimes Watcher struggles a little bit with the AoE fights, and Gremlin Horn makes that no longer really an issue. The game has cards which deal single target damage, which are what you're going to benefit from most in the Act 1 boss fight, because the Act 1 boss fight is pretty much exclusively single target damage with the exception of the latest parts of the slime boss fight. And then you have cards which deal AoE damage, right? And so making your deck good at AoE damage costs a little bit more than making it good at only single target damage. You have to take like 1 or 2 more attacks which are good at that thing in particular, and with Gremlin Horn, all of a sudden that doesn't matter nearly as much. You don't have to worry quite as much about the AoE stuff. Although I already had Conclude, so in this situation I was already pretty good at the area of effect fights. Cut Through Fate, Unceasing Top, Mango. Sometimes Unceasing Top goes off as Watcher, especially with like Deva form, but generally there's an expectation from players who play, especially below Ascension 10, that you can make all sorts of cool infinites with Unceasing Top. And unfortunately, the actual way that it works is that it draws 0.31 cards per combat, and this is good output, I would say. And if you want to go infinite in this game, there are just tons of better ways to do it, which are way more powerful and easier to establish. That said, I think it actually did sort of go off a little bit here because I had Unceasing Top plus Deus Ex plus Medkit. So this actually was a decent run for Unceasing Top. And keep in mind, I only drew 9 cards, so I'm not saying it was incredible or anything, just like I did actually manage to make it happen sometimes this time around. Once you get above Ascension 10, you have an Ascender's Bane in your deck, which makes one of your turns just not work with Unceasing Top at all, and if you like start to go off with Unceasing Top on turn 1, you'll eventually just draw Ascender's Bane and be stuck, and honestly, like, just that happening is enough for most people, I think, to give up on the dream. Upgraded Just Lucky. Just Lucky is a surprisingly good upgrade for a 0-cost card. 1 more scry, 1 more attack, 1 more block. This adds up to actually quite a lot of value. Eat up a Gremlin Knob very easily. I took Reach Heaven for a little bit more help against Hexaghost. This is like pretty common, I would say, over preparing for Hexaghost, because sometimes if you draw cards in the wrong order against Hexaghost, you can die. But cards which just ensure that you can deal a lot of damage by the end of 7 turns are great against Hexaghost, so Reach Heaven is sort of at its best in this sort of fight. Markelcom's Spirit Shield. Yeah, Spirit Shield's like okay. It's an okay output card, I guess. And we purchase Orange Pellets on floor 14 along with our first Fasting. So if you don't know, Fasting applies a debuff to you where you get 1 less energy at the start of each turn, and for that debuff you get quite powerful 3 or 4 strength and dexterity. And Orange Pellets, of course, removes all of your debuffs when you play a power, attack, and skill in the same turn. And Fasting is already a power, so all you need to do is play an attack and a skill, and you don't have that energy down, and instead you have a 0 downside, 4 attack, 7 attack, 6 block Fasting. Woo boy. Imagine having a single card that can attack for 7 and block for 6. It's like almost an upgraded Iron Wave. Anyway, this actually does start to snowball out of control pretty quickly. as it does in this run. We got a Blasphemy to help us out with Act 2 elite fights, which is awesome. We got a Pandora's Box, which gave us, in this case, Fear No Evil, Like Water, Wallop, Cut Through Fate, Talk to the Hand, Collect, Windmill Strike, Lesson Learned. The run's over. GG. Well done, everybody. Pack it up. We're going home. Managed to almost die to Act 2 elites. I did take 3 of them before Campfire, though, so, you know. So, you know. I was probably taking damage in those fights in order to play Lesson Learned as well. And the deck ends up being a very strong, fully upgraded, just about Watcher deck with a little bit of stat swapping. But actually, this deck's somewhat unique as a deck that ended the run with 4 copies of Just Lucky and 3 copies of Fasting. That definitely doesn't happen all the time. And yeah, when you have 12 dexterity, it turns out that playing a Just Lucky is pretty good, especially if you also have 12 strength. Okay, back to Ironclad. This time we relic swap into Slaver's Collar, which is, you know, okay. It makes us a little bit more inclined to pursue elite fights. We're not going to be as good in hallway fights as we would have been if we just had our starter relic. So we actually got worse at hallway fights with this relic swap. But hallway fights tend to be easier than elite fights anyways, so this is an okay trade to be making. It's alright. An Ironclad run with Slaver's Collar is going to ideally want to not go to that many hallway fights and go to lots of elite fights, events, and stores. Is sort of our dream, since we are relatively weak in hallway fights compared to another run. That can change pretty quickly if we get a Reaper or something, but let's see what happens. Got a Flame Barrier off Small Slimes, taking 15 damage. Ouch. Flame Barrier over Headbutt. Flame Barrier does deal a little bit of damage, so it's like sort of okay. I think a Rampage over Wild Strike against Jawworm. I think I have like sentimental attachment to Rampage. Rampage used to be a card that was good enough to like beat Act 2 at Ascension 15, and I think I should probably just give up on it at this point. It's just not that powerful. And the other things that you can do are so powerful and have been repeatedly buffed over the course of the last, well, since the game came out. So, you know, whatever. The card's fine. It happens to be pretty decent against Lagavulin and like fine against Gremlin and Sentry, so there's nothing super wrong with taking it. It's just, I think Wild Strike is probably the preferable card for getting through these elites early. The boss is Guardian. Actually pretty good against Guardian for what it's worth. I'm not sure how much you care whether a card's good against Guardian or not though. Like usually Guardian's a pretty free fight. Shockwave over Burning Pact and True Grit, plus a power potion from the Cultist. Shockwave, a little bit more appealing given that we have 4 energy. It's a card that can help us deal damage to Gremlin Nob or Lagavulin, where Burning Pact and True Grit don't do an incredible job of that right now. And I bought a Clothesline and removed a Strike at the Merchant, which is not an incredible Merchant, but, you know, I guess it was good enough. Lagavulin dealt us 6 damage with a Shockwave and a Clothesline. It's not going to be attacking for that much. We also had a Flame Barrier at this point, so yeah. It's going to be a frustrated Lagavulin as we just sort of block for enough most turns. We got a Molten Egg, Battle Trance, Distilled Chaos, good potion. Yeah, and taking Battle Trance over Spot Weakness here. Ironclad. See, if I were playing Defect, I wouldn't be taking a card like Battle Trance over a Defragment, because like every single Defect run wins off of what Defragment does, just about. 90+% of them, in my opinion. But when you're playing Ironclad, there are very different scaling options, which do not talk to each other very well. There's the Strength plus Reaper, and there's the Exhaust Stuff plus Feel No Pain. And often, you'll play Exhaust Stuff with Feel No Pain and only block with it, and then you will deal damage with Strength Stuff. And so they can communicate with each other in that way. But there are also definitely runs where you play Exhaust Stuff with Feel No Pain and you deal damage with Juggernaut instead of Strength. or even with something else like Barricade Body Slam. So while it is fairly likely that I want a spot weakness at some point, my general impression of Act 1 in Ironclad is that I don't want to try to force myself into that thing. It's like, I would take spot weakness over skipping here, no question whatsoever. But Battle Trance is a very, very, very strong card, and spot weakness is not necessary for winning the run at all. So I think definitely happy with Battle Trance here. Generally, I would take an Inflame over skipping an Act 1 with Ironclad as well, but it's like, once you take 2 Inflames, or an Inflame plus a spot weakness or something, there are a good number of runs which you end up losing, because those cards are in your deck and they do not contribute to what you're actually doing. Whereas if you don't take them, you like find your Feel No Pain in your Juggernaut, and you just don't have 2 bricks in your deck, so your deck is that much faster and that much more powerful. Upgrading Flame Barrier, Mango, Shrug It Off from Gremlin Knob, who dealt us 0 damage, cool. Charon's Ashes. Charon's Ashes, I believe, is the Greek pronunciation. Yeah, this Relic's good. It doesn't work very well with spot weakness, but we didn't take spot weakness, so haha, OP. This dealt 7.6 damage per turn over the course of the run, for what it's worth. Pommel Strike Plus is fine. We upgrade Shrug It Off, that seems fine. Taking a Rage over Evolve, and Dropkick Plus. All very, very, like, situationally good cards. I feel like Ironclad cards have very large ranges for how good they are depending on how the run develops. I think that's true for Ironclad and for Silent. I think Defects cards are almost always almost exactly as valuable in every single run. And I think Watchers cards are all fucking broken. So, yeah. Yeah, interesting. Mercury Hourglass from a question mark is fine. We take a Body Slam Plus off of Lagavulin, which is made doable by our Battle Trance, our Shrug It Off, and our Flame Barrier. And in this situation, we can expect that Body Slam to get pretty strong over the course of the run, and so we're quite likely to be in a run where we aren't ending up looking for a lot of strength. Upgraded Rage. Oh yeah, Rage is also pretty good with Body Slam for what it's worth. And we take 1 damage from Guardian. I took double tap over Exhume and Berserk. I certainly understand that over Berserk. I'm sort of surprised by it over Exhume though, given how the run has started. But I guess I don't have anything that's exhausting yet, actually, if you think about it. And double tap does work with Rage okay. And I also have card draw, which makes double tap a little bit better. Double tap is a card that it's like 2-card combo by itself, basically. If you draw it plus a good attack, it's great. If you draw it without a good attack, it's awful. So having card draw makes double tap better. Having card draw tends to make everything better, but it makes double tap better at a rate greater than it makes a card like Shrug It Off better. Shrug It Off is made better by card draw a little bit, sure, but it's mostly good if you have no card draw as well. It is itself card draw, in fact. Flame Barrier, same sort of idea. If you can more reliably draw a Flame Barrier on the turn you're getting multi-attacked, it makes it a bit stronger, but it's also pretty good to just draw in a hand of 5 on any turn, usually. Whereas double tap can be really bad to draw, quite often. And drawing 3 more cards can turn it from being really bad to really good, despite it still being the same turn. Get a Snecko Eye from the floor 17 reward. My general opinion of Ironclad plus Snecko Eye is that you pretty much just win. And looking at how Act 2 went, it went very well. And then looking at how Act 3 went, it also went very well. In fact, even better than Act 2. Significantly better than Act 2. So this ends up being a pretty comfortable win after the Snecko Eye pickup. The largest contributor to winning from there is Corruption. Corruption plus Snekoi is largely why Snekoi is so good on Ironclad, because drawing 2 extra cards a turn is very, very powerful when every single skill in your deck costs 0. On top of that, every skill in your deck is drawing you a card when you play it, plus gaining you an extra 4 block when you play it. This run did also get a Juggernaut, so when I play Defend, I will draw a card, gain 9 block, deal 10 damage for 0 energy once I have these powers set up. I call this Ironclad Exodia. It's a fairly common way to win at highest difficulty. One of the concerns that people always have when they look at Corruption is what happens when you run out of skills, and when you have these powers, you don't run out of skills, basically, because the enemy dies too fast. If you do run out of skills, though, one thing you can definitely do is grab a Sundial from a shop or something, and then exhaust down to, like, Pommel Strike. Actually, was this a run where I won with double tap Pommel Strike in some of the fights instead of playing Corruption? I don't remember. Maybe it was. How long was this fight? 5 turns, 5 turns, 8 turns? Probably not. I don't have Fiend Fire. Yeah, probably that didn't happen here. But sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes you end up actually not using Corruption because you want to exhaust everything except one of your skills and build some sort of late game infinite for Ironclad. And it can change from fight to fight. In one fight you might want to exhaust 30 cards slowly with a True Grit and a Burning Pact and then go infinite, and another fight that would just take way too long and you can just play Corruption and win anyway. There's a good amount of judgment call involved in this sort of stuff. So I have another silent boss relic swap. An empty cage this time. I don't generally think boss relic swaps are very strong on silent. It's interesting to me that I did this twice. Is a Hexago stacked? I don't know. Maybe I should try doing it more again. There was a time on 2.2 where I thought that boss relic swaps were like just legitimately really, really strong on everybody. I've never personally enjoyed playing boss relic swap runs. I feel like they enter draw the rest of the elephant phase a lot more often than starter relic runs for all 4 characters, just because some of the boss relics are so strong. And I don't like entering the draw the rest of the elephant phase. I want to like be challenged to play the game for as much of the run as possible. And so for a long time, I've just sort of avoided boss relic swapping because I think even if it is better, it's not as fun for me. But also during that time, I've typically felt that with good play, boss relic swapping is probably stronger almost always on Ironclad, a lot of the time on Defect, some of the time on Silent, and some of the time on Watcher. And yeah, I tend to boss relic swap less often than I think I should for all of the characters except for Ironclad, although I've been boss relic swapping less on Ironclad lately. Maybe I should try more on Silent again. Interesting, because I almost feel like this was a different human being playing these runs in January. Like, I don't have an incredibly strong ability to remember that part of my life, and I don't have an incredibly strong ability to like relate to how I was feeling or what I was thinking about the characters necessarily, because it's just this void in my brain almost where I was working so hard that all I was focused on was working on things, and there are no like real milestones in there for me to anchor memories to. It was just sitting in this chair playing Slay the Spire. One of the only milestones that I have is this win streak, and even there, I can remember parts of the runs because I've looked at the run histories. But in terms of how I was feeling on these days and stuff, I remember being a little bit nervous going to sleep at like 8:00 or whenever it was I went to sleep before I broke it. And I also remember being very happy when I finally lost, because I just didn't want to deal with the stress anymore. Just a feeling of absolute relief and a little bit of sadness, but mostly absolute relief. So anyway, Predator start is fine. Good damage. Good way to deal damage. Into Terror, so yeah, I mean, that's also fine. Transformed Strike into Outmaneuver, which Outmaneuver is not a very good Act 1 card, but it happens to be decent with Predator specifically, so it's nice that I got a bad Act 1 card, but in a situation where it was actually unusually good this time around. Bouncing Flask on floor 5, so we've got a little bit of attack damage and a little bit of poison damage. This is fine. This is an okay damage profile to have going through Act 1. It gives us the ability to adapt to which relics we get and which powerful cards we get to set up whatever type of damage makes the most sense for late game. And I get a Toxic Egg, so once I get a Toxic Egg, I'm expecting that the Bouncing Flask is probably going to be more of a thing than the Terror. Although Blade Dance is a skill, isn't it? Piercing Whale Plus, pretty good card. Prepared Plus. Prepared Plus is like fun. It's a very fun card. Unclear how good it really is, but it's gotten a little bit better with buffs to Reflex, and Sneaky Strike, and some other stuff like that. Bought a Noxious Fumes at the store, so we're trying to set up for our very typical, like, good defense plus incredibly broken poison damage type of silent run. Take a Cursed Key from the end of the act. Cursed Key made a little bit easier to take by the fact that I have an empty cage, so I'm dealing with a less bloated deck. I have fewer strikes and defends in it. Looks like if I hadn't picked up Blood Vial, I would have had to rest. So in this situation, picking up Blood Vial from the chest just immediately gave me good output. Acrobatics Plus. Time to take those. I upgraded Outmaneuver at the upgrade shrine despite having 4 energy. Yeah, this is a situation where with Acrobatics and Predator, Outmaneuver is genuinely pretty good. Like another Predator, this one's upgraded. 25 damage from the Masked Bandit, so we get all-out attack. It's a bit of an ouch, but we do get a rest in. Beat the Slavers without too much trouble. I actually took Reflex Plus with Prepared and Acrobatics. Here we go. I used to, way back forever ago, I didn't believe this was the right way to play Silent, but I used to really love trying to build Silent to always win every fight on turn 1. So the way that you'd do that was to have like Reflex and Tactician and lots of copies of Acrobatics, and then you can basically get to a point where you just play cards indefinitely. Lots of copies of like Prepared Plus, Calculated Gamble Plus. There's no Calculated Gamble in this deck, unfortunately, but that discards your entire hand and draws that many cards. Yeah, once you have that going on, you can play your deck indefinitely and kill stuff with whatever you want. You can kill it with like Letter Opener, you can kill it with Grand Finale if you want, you can kill it with Slice, like why not? You're genuinely playing every card in your deck indefinitely, so whatever you want to do to deal damage will do it. I used to love that so much. And I still get really excited at the opportunity to do something like that. It just unfortunately isn't very good. The problem with it is that you don't get to put like strong powers in your deck, and you get absolutely obliterated by enemies which put statuses into your deck. So like Nemesis can sometimes kill you if you don't kill Nemesis on turn 1 successfully, for example. You die to Slavers in Act 2 an awful lot because they just look at you playing Acrobatics but not being a fully fledged deck yet, and put 3 wounds in your discard pile and tell you you're adorable and then attack you for 50. But, you know. Mummified Hand is fun. Took a Phantasmal Killer Plus as well. It's pretty cool. We've got a mixed damage profile. Actually taking Skewer Plus now, so I'm leaning a little bit more towards attacks, actually, than poison type stuff. That's fine. It's fine to have attack damage and poison damage. It's going to be good in different situations, and Silent has so much card draw and card selection that she's able to do a pretty good job of finding the type of damage that's going to be good in the situation she's in and playing it. I'm just skipping through this because after taking Runic Pyramid and having Mummified Hand and Ice Cream, it stops being a run, basically. Like, didn't drop below 63 health in Act 3, and I'm pretty comfortable when common theme in the heart fight is you take a bit of damage on turn 2 and 3 and then get things completely under control. So not very surprising that I took 43 damage. Not very surprising that it took 10 turns to kill the heart either. This deck doesn't do damage very well. But with Tori, Incense Burner, Runic Pyramid is an incredibly powerful defensive relic, especially when coupled with cards like Piercing Wail, making sure that you can play those in the multi-attack turn. This just ends up being good enough. So at this point, is that 8? Yeah, that's 8 in a row. So at this point, I'm definitely starting to think, oh shit, this is like... My personal best is 9, right? So one more to tie my personal best, which is always the most exciting thing to me. And then I'm starting to think, oh, there's also like a world record in the distance. 2 more to tie the world record, 3 more to break it and set a new standalone world record that nobody's done before. And I had wanted to get 10 in a row for a really long time at this point. It's just like a pretty nice round number. I remember when Blur set the 10-0, he said that he thought no one else would ever do it again, and I thought that was ludicrous. So there's just a little bit of like, how dare you going on in my mind as well. Not in like a bad way, but in a... I don't know quite how to describe it, but when someone tells me I'm not able to do something, my response is commonly, well, let's see. It happens a lot in runs when people in chat are like, there's no way that taking this card and fighting those elites will go okay. And I'm just like, well, fuck you, I'm gonna do it. Another reason why I don't always play runs perfectly. Anyway, yeah, okay, so moving on. It's interesting that I wasn't swearing at all in the first few videos of the series and have now just gone complete send it. I don't know. Jawworm. This is a relic swap for Coffee Dripper. Coffee Dripper is a tricky one. You often have a little bit of trouble surviving Act 2. And when you can't rest, it gets a lot scarier. On the other hand, Defect has access to very good sustain and self-repair. So if we can find self-repair, Coffee Dripper feels a lot better. If we can find another type of sustain relic, Coffee Dripper feels a lot better. Otherwise, Coffee Dripper is really scary. There are a lot of runs where you need a bit better sustain, and there just aren't that many ways to get sustain and slay the Spire, and so it feels like you're sort of rolling a die over and over again and seeing if you hit, and you don't hit all that often, really, so it feels a little bit gross to play runs like that. And sometimes when you start with Coffee Dripper, it can feel a teeny bit like that, I would say. Take a Compile Driver and Tropic Brew. One thing is like you can keep yourself alive with regen potions if you find them, but that's very subject to variance. Early Capacitor. This is, I believe, correct. I know there are a lot of people who wouldn't say this is correct, but yeah, I talked at length in my world record defect streak about how I just think that it's right to be taking Capacitor here. And I know earlier when we looked at a defect round, I was telling you the numbers on like how often you see the orb scaling powers, and you don't have much reason to think that you're going to see like 6 of them per run or anything. If you're choosing not to take some of them, you are massively increasing the percentage of the time that you reach the late game gauntlet without enough of them to scale easily for it. So if you're choosing not to take Capacitor here, you better be making up for it in some very consistent way that's going to let you easily beat the endgame stuff anyway, because you're giving up on the most accessible one, in my opinion. Alright, Cold Snap, upgrade Bullseye, sure. Bullseye's like surprisingly good. I think Bullseye is a bit of a hard card to evaluate, but targets taking 50% more damage from orbs matters. Matters quite a lot. You're kidding me, my webcam's been frozen for like the last 7 years. That's unfortunate. I wonder how long that's been going on for. It looks like the video is almost 2 hours long. Hopefully it hasn't been going on for too long. Maybe it's been going on the entire time. Shoot. Oh well. I hope you liked that perspective of my face. Looks like my hair isn't great right now. Too bad. Yeah, we take another... Well, we take 2 ball lightnings here after our bullseye, so that's pretty good early game damage. That's going to get us through most stuff. Take an anchor, which I'm very excited about, especially with no access to sustain because of Coffee Dripper. And we get the self-repair off of sentries, and now I'm feeling pretty good about this run. Remove a strike, get an electrodynamics from a hallway fight, which is very lucky. Electrodynamics taken over Glacier, which... It's like... The order of operations for taking defect cards is sort of... The orb scaling things are the most prominent need because you want to get 4 of them by the end of the run or whatever. After that, your damage in order to get through the fights early in the game is very important, and after that, your block cards in order to... Like, they're good for surviving the mid-game fights as well, but you can rest a lot if you don't have them yet. But you're probably going to really need them for the late game stuff, so they're sort of the last thing that you care about. So here, Electrodynamics seems more important than Glacier because I need damage for the Act 2 stuff, and I don't need to worry about blocking all that much just yet. You got Self-Repair, I've got Anchor, stuff like that. Take a Hologram, sure, upgrade Electrodynamics. Electrodynamics is an awesome upgrade, very good. And I took Calling Bell off of the Slime boss fight. I'm not sure what this was up against. I don't imagine it was up against anything incredibly strong. Relics are decently good at giving you sustain. Defects decently good at scaling off of relics. Going to be okay. It's going to be better than skipping, but not better than like Runic Pyramid or something like that. Definitely. And not better than probably most of the other relics as well. Got a turbo against City Muggers, generally pretty good. Not sure I have quite enough card draw to really justify it yet, but we can expect to get more card draw pretty quickly in this run. Orange Pellets, transform strikes into Cold Snapping a Pile Driver, huge floor, massive improvement to the deck. Got a Glacier, after having to give up the last one for Electrodynamics. Another hologram. 2 holograms at this point. I wonder if Electrodynamics is important enough for what's about to happen that we shouldn't be taking a second hologram right now, and should instead be prioritizing making sure that we can find Electrodynamics. I actually take Boot Sequence over Glacier here despite having an anchor already, which I think is pretty interesting, but you do get attacked for more than 10 on turn 1 a lot of the time, and I do already have 1 Glacier. You don't necessarily need 2 Glaciers. Often having too many cards that generate cold orbs is not useful. So, yeah, it's okay. Created machine learning. Oh, maybe that's one of the reasons that I took the boot sequence, is that I had a machine learning from earlier, and so I wanted to make sure that I could safely play it on turn 1. And then once I have the machine learning and play on turn 1, the turbo makes a lot more sense for future turns. So yeah, that all sort of makes sense to me. Take an Echo Form off the Book of Stabbing, leaving the fight at full health. 30 damage from Slavers, they give us lots of cards that we don't want to take, and a Ceramic Fish. Thank you, Slavers. Appreciate ya. And we got a Regal Pillow from Book of Stabbing. So a few whiffs. Regal Pillow, not known to be super good with Coffee Dripper. Got a Barrage, often just barely impressed by Barrage. Late game and defect. I've talked about this already though. Darklings dealt a ton of damage to us. Darklings line up really well against what defect is good at, so they often deal defect a lot of damage. Reptimancer also, if you don't manage to draw Electrodynamics, Reptimancer can be a pretty rough fight. This is a situation where those holograms that I took earlier, again, I'm questioning them because they are slowing down my ability to draw Electrodynamics. But all that being said, it's not like I died. Giant Head. See, if we don't take Capacitor in Act 1, I think we died a Giant Head here a decent amount of the time. We only just barely have enough scaling to handle this fight, so yeah. 0 damage against Nemesis though. Managed to Echo Form Self-Repair Plus to heal for 20 off this hallway fight. We upgrade Consume, also we're healing for 21 off Eternal Feather at this point in the run, which is awesome. Second time through, the Giant Head fight goes a lot better with the upgrade to Consume and with a Reinforced Body added and a Cool Headed. So when we're heavily reliant on one particular card to scale off of, which order we draw our cards in makes a huge difference to how fights go, which, you know, shouldn't be surprising really. This is actually when we got the second Capacitor. So the first time in the Giant Head fight, we had an unupgraded Consume and a Capacitor Plus, and that was all we were scaling off of. And we very rapidly improved that to 2 Capacitors and a Consume Plus, which makes the deck much, much, much better. And we have just barely enough to get us through the rest of the run. Add a disc to help a little bit. Take a bunch of damage against Shield and Spear, but of course we heal up off of Self-Repair, and we have a Pantograph already at this point. And 63 damage off Corrupt Heart, but not enough to die. So cool. Good defect run. At this point I'm at 9-0. That is equal with my personal best. I think this was the 3rd time that I went 9-0. So 10-0 for me has been like a white whale. It's been a distant peak that I've come so close to, and yet which has always felt so far away. And it looks like I went ahead and just played the run. I probably would not have slept very well if I hadn't, in fairness. So I went ahead and played my Watcher run. The expectation is that you win on Watcher, especially when you're playing at a high level, which is certainly the expectation when you are at 9-0 in a win streak. You're going to be pulling out the stops, you know? And I spent 3 hours on this run, so I think this is almost certainly the longest that I spent on any run for the entirety of the month. If you look at my runs up until that point, I'm only spending like an hour to maybe 2 hours at the absolute upper limit on these runs. My Ironclad run for 7 was an hour, hour 10 to go 8, hour 50 to go for 9. At this point, I am starting to think and be more deliberate. And then yeah, for Watcher, there is a very large amount of room for you to spend a long time thinking about Watcher turns and improve your results in a Watcher run. This is just a truth about Watcher. Which order you play the cards in matters a lot. And if you want to win a run as Watcher one time, you should sit down and have a spreadsheet and play that run for 8+ hours. If you want to win a run as Watcher one time. If you want to get as good as you can at Slay the Spire, you probably shouldn't do that, because once you've worked out how the math works one time, you're not benefiting that much from going through the motions of doing it again over and over and over again. But when I reach this situation where I'm at 9-0 and I really want to win another run, I am absolutely going to use my experience with focusing very hard on runs in the past, which I have a lot of, to focus very hard on this run. And so this is sort of a different mode of gameplay that we're entering now, where I am going to be spending a lot of time doing math on different things and working out what the absolute correct line every turn is based on different distributions of possible hands next turn and different possibilities of enemy actions next turn and stuff like this. And all of these things can change a tremendous amount for Watcher. And going into this run with an expectation that it would be one of the easier runs in the streak, it wasn't. This was probably the hardest run in the entire streak, in fact. And I was pushed really hard. I started this run at 10:54 p.m. after playing for 6 hours that day already, 6.5 hours nonstop already, without like stopping for a meal or anything like that. I just went straight into the 6.5 hours into the day and played a 3-hour watcher run, leveraging as much of my brain as I possibly could into winning it. I got a Frozen Eye in this run, and I sent it. I'm really happy that I won this run. This is one of the coolest runs that I've ever won, actually. Watcher has the ability to scale for late game in so many different ways, but there are also runs where you miss the obvious easy ways to scale for late game, and you have to get really creative sometimes if you want to win. And Watcher's cards do so many different things that it's possible to find creative solutions, which can happen, but you're going to have to be pretty clever with how exactly you pull them off, and you're going to have to pay a lot of attention to what's going on, because you may never have played a deck that works quite like this before, just because it's a very unique type of take on your Watcher run winning. So, the run begins. We do not relic swap, as we have not been relic swapping much at all. I'm not sure exactly what I took, but we'll probably find out maybe later. I don't know. They can empty body immediately over Rushdown and Fasting, which I think it's a good decision if you're going to try very hard to win a run. I think if you're not willing to work super hard to win the run here, picking Fasting or Rushdown and just fishing for the really easy win, with Fasting plus any number of different things, or Rushdown plus Wrath and Calm cards, makes sense. But if you're willing to work really hard to win a run, I think taking Empty Body on floor 1 is the way to go. It helps your deck the most immediately, and you can find ways to win the run later. So, there's our start. We get the boot from Scrapooz. Thank you, Scrapooz. Not super excited that I've started Empty Body plus boot so far, but you know, it is what it is. I get Flying Sleeves over Protect. Again, Flying Sleeves not the best early Act 1 attack, but we can make it work. Explosive Potion's nice to have for sure. And then a follow-up over Signature Move and Crush Joints. I think Crush Joints arguably better than follow-up here. I don't know. Could go either way on follow-up versus Crush Joints. They're definitely both okay cards. I'm in a situation where I don't have a ton of energy, so I think that's why I'm taking follow-up here. We get a Conclude from the store and remove a Defend. So we're all spooled up and ready to hit things really hard as we go into elite fights here. And take 6 damage off Gremlin Knob, get a meal ticket and a weak potion, but unfortunately skip our relic reward, or our card reward rather. Maybe Like Water could be pickable here. I guess I'm not looking for more block cards, so I'm not taking an Empty Body. I'm guessing that my whale bonus helped me block in some way right now, based on what cards I'm choosing to do. Oh shit, it was Wish. Okay. So I took Wish from the whale. Oh. Yeah, okay, that's extra zest for this run. That's awesome. I forgot about that. Anyway, we upgrade our Wish. So yeah, with Wish we can play it for plated armor in fights where we need defense, so defensive cards are not nearly as important, but also we have the ability to get gold off of this card. 30 gold anytime we play it, and that can help us scale very, very hard into late game, just by letting us buy a lot of stuff at stores. Assuming that we survive, and assuming that we do well enough in fights to be able to actually do that. Ornamental Fan is a tremendously good Watcher card, also got a Cut Through Fate. We're skipping Holt and Deva form. I think significantly too early in the run to be picking a Deva form, and Holt not doing an incredible amount with only one way into Wrath. Not a lot of card draw either. I actually went ahead and skipped my treasure on floor 9, so at this point I have the boot, meal ticket, Ornamental Fan, which is good. Ornamental Fan's good, and a blue key. So my relics overall are, I would say, like 10th percentile at this point, or possibly even a little bit worse. Not a very good showing for Act 1 relics. Get another Cut Through Fate over Bowling Bash, which, I don't know, I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that. Maybe a Bowling Bash would be better. Upgrade Eruption seems fine. Reach Heaven helps us out with Slime Boss, I guess. Seems fine. Like Water not really happening because we can't enter Calm very well. I went ahead and took Shining Light, putting myself at 9 HP to upgrade Defend and Follow Up. I assumed that I had potions that made me feel safe here. Anyway, took 0 damage from Gremlin Knob and took a Bronze Scales and Deceive Reality. Deceive Reality is a decent block card, and we're in a situation where we've gotten through Act 1, and it's pretty clear that our deck isn't broken yet and still has to work to win. So taking cards which have good output going into Act 2 makes a lot of sense here. We're not going to be able to dismiss cards based on them not constructing a coherent late-game synergistic package at the moment, because we have to take every card that gives us good output so we don't just immediately die, unfortunately. Also, Deceive Reality helps us play Wish for Gold, sort of a fun truth. You got a Volt off Slime Boss over Devaform and Conjure Blade. Conjure Blade not a consideration, and Devaform, again, it's just a bit too early for this card. Probably a lot too early for this card, you could even say. And I took Holy Water from the boss reward, which I've talked about before. I think Holy Water is just great. When you do take Holy Water, you want to make sure that you have the ability to scale into something after you've finished getting the benefit from it, but having 3 energy or 6 energy if you upgrade these in some way at the start of a fight is very, very powerful. If you compare that to a regular energy relic, I would have 1 miracle in my starting hand and be getting 1 energy every turn, so we'd break even on turn 2. And then as of turn 3, I would have more energy off the regular boss relic, but you have to consider that the boss relic has a downside attached to it, which is going to matter. And you also have to consider that I cannot save the energy from the boss relic for later turns if I want to. Whereas with Holy Water, I am able to hold on to these miracles until like turn 4 to do a ton of stuff on turn 4 or something like that if I want. And that ability to choose when I get to spend that energy and have 1 big turn is a very big deal. We kill Shelled Parasite and take Nirvana over Crescendo, I would say, is the big other option here. Take a Whale Kick. I guess I had a decent amount of Scry already, so I'm thinking, okay, I need some sort of scaling. My deck has basically no scaling yet, so Nirvana is at least some way to get started on that. Purchased Frozen Eye and Flurry of Blows. Frozen Eye is just one of the most powerful cards in the powerful relics in the game by far, if you're willing to try to maximize it. If you're not willing to try to maximize it, it's not so great. But if you're willing to sit down and think through how exactly turns are going to go, especially if you have the ability to change how many cards you're drawing every turn with things like Scry, for example, you can do just very ridiculous things with Frozen Eye. Foreign Influence Plus is solid over Deceive Reality, Flurry of Blows. This card will help us quite a bit in the elite fights that are coming up. Upgraded Volt because I'm a little bit light on energy, so when I'm light on energy in Watcher runs, I tend to start upgrading cards which save me energy. Just how it works. Take 0 damage from Gremlin Leader and get a Regal Pillow and a Simmering Fury, both pretty nice rewards. Got a Scrawl from Centurion and Mystic. So, yeah, I didn't get a rare from Gremlin Leader, so my rare chance is getting pretty high by the time I reach the Centurion and Mystic fight, I guess. And Scrawl's a pretty nice one to have, especially with Holy Water. You draw Scrawl, you play all 3 of your miracles and play Scrawl, and you have a really huge turn, pretty much no matter what. In this case, I also have Frozen Eyes, so I can even guarantee that it's going to be a really good turn before I play all of those miracles. Or I can change how many cards I want to draw by only playing 1 miracle, then playing Scrawl, and I can have a really big turn this turn. Plus I can set up to have the right cards getting drawn next turn based on what's in my draw pile. So lots of ways I can manipulate that to be very strong. Purchased a membership card only from the merchant, which is pretty interesting. This is believing that I can get through Act 2 and thinking that I need more help for late game, and keep in mind that I have a wish, so I can get a lot of gold if I get ahead. We get a pair, we get an upgrade on Scrawl, again upgrading for energy. Easy Taskmaster fight, upgrade for Mental Fortress after we pick Mental Fortress from Taskmaster, and honestly I think at this point I thought I had pretty much always won the run when I picked up Mental Fortress. I don't have a ton of stat swapping, and it's only one Mental Fortress and one Nirvana, but it's just very reasonable to think that with Membership Card plus Wish, any reasonable rewards for the rest of the run are going to make us easily win. You've seen how quickly I just scrub through Act 3 and 4 from this point of a Watcher run, right? We'll get a Toxic Egg as well, so now it's like feeling even more true. Take a Tranquility, take a Third Eye plus, upgrade Nirvana, beat the Collector very easily and take an Omniscience plus. So I'm feeling just so good here. With Omniscience plus, I can double play Wish for gold, I can double play Mental Fortress, I can do so many things. I took a Sozu as my boss reward, which is like okay. The downside of Sozu is if your deck isn't able to beat very difficult fights, you're not able to collect the best possible potions for those fights. But generally when I take Sozu at the end of Act 2, I already have 2 very good potions. I very rarely take Sozu at the end of Act 2 without potions that are good for upcoming boss fights. Did I not get a potion this act? Looks like maybe I had an Essence of Steel and an Energy Potion. Well, I wouldn't say those are particularly good potions. I went a long time without getting offered a potion there. But anyway, we actually go into Act 3, and that one's a brick. The Sensory Stone was okay. I got Master of Strategy, Flash of Steel, Good Instincts, and a Panic Button at some point, which is all good. 275 gold into Regret is great right before a store, where I got Calipers and Toolbox, just still looking for something really strong. I took a Protect Plus over a Like Water. Maybe Like Water would have been good, but I can't get into Calm very easily right now, so I don't know. Like Water could have been better, maybe. I took a fairly late Lesson Learned, which is... well, it's late, but on the other hand, I don't have stuff to make Indignation particularly good. There's no Rushdown, I only have 1 Mental Fortress, and Sands of Time isn't going to be great, so might as well take some upgrades. That's one way to make sure that we have help killing the heart. Took a Tranquility against the Maw. Just another way out of Wrath, another way to get more energy as well, as we're like playing Volts and Scrolls and working our way through our deck really quickly. Strike Dummy from the floor 43 chest is an awesome. Removed Reach Heaven, that card's just not doing anything anymore. Skipped Pressure Points Bowling Bash Crush Joints, skipped Crush Joints Crescendo Bowling Bash. We're not even finding Scry commons at this point, we're just finding nothing. Took a Fear No Evil Plus from Nemesis, that's like okay. Skipped Bowling Bash Pressure Points Prostrate, obtained a Study. Study is not very good, but it's boss fight time. And we just went the entire act basically missing everything. Like there was 1 Like Water I was offered, but didn't really seem like it did that much. So we're going into the boss gauntlet, actually resting before it. I think this is the first Watcher run I've looked at where I've rested at the end of Act 3. We take 36 damage from Time Eater, come quite close to dying in this fight, and then 22 damage from Awakened One, come very close to dying in this fight. And we like just barely make it through those fights. We have a good amount of gold, 724, so we're looking for a really good store, and then I walk into the store at the end of the run and there just isn't that much there. Kunai, Art of War, Sling of Courage for the Elite fight, the Master of Strategy Plus is fine, and then I took Pray Plus and Devotion, because that was basically what was left for me. And the idea with Devotion here is that I can hit it with Omniscience, and once I hit it with Omniscience, it's going to give me enough energy with my Cut Through Fates and my Wheel Kick and my Study and my Master of Strategy and my Scrawl as well to basically block for enough off of the fact that I have an extra 3 energy from entering Divinity. I also have the Protect Plus, I have double Third Eye Plus. And on top of that, it's going to hopefully give me enough damage to win the heart fight by like turn 6. But this is the weakest Watcher deck that I've taken to a hard fight. it's not only that the cards didn't come together, like there's no Talk to the Hand, there's only one Mental Fortress. We've got one Omniscience, but it's not like bottled or anything. It's not just that the cards didn't come together, but also the relics are just not that good. The Calipers that I bought hasn't really paid off. I ended up with a Kunai, but I do not have Flurry of Blows or Weave to really take advantage of it. There's the one Flurry of Blows, but not a ton of stat swapping. This deck just sort of misfired a little bit. Just isn't that good. So, I'm very concerned about this. I go into the elite fight, I take 26 damage from shield and spear. I get a turnip and a third eye, which are fine. Turnip's actually pretty premium here, and third eye plus is good. And when I play Lesson Learned in this fight, it upgraded Devotion for me, so the Devotion is now upgraded. I walk into the boss fight at 46 health. I look at my draw pile with Frozen Eye, and not only is Omniscience at the bottom of my draw pile, which is 39 cards, but on top of Omniscience being at the bottom of my draw pile, so is Mental Fortress, and so is Nirvana. So that is every card that I have for block scaling unavailable for me. And I looked at this, and like people in chat were looking at it too, and just saying, this is unwinnable. Like, there's no way. And I was looking at it and thinking, there's a way, but I have to get pretty lucky still. And of course I'm sitting at 9-0, trying to go 10-0, break my personal best, tie the world record, so this is like pretty emotional, pretty hype for me right now. And the way that I end up beating this heart fight, I guess I recommend watching this run on YouTube. It's available. The way I ended up beating this heart fight was I used all of the scry in this deck and all of the card draw and everything to get all the way to the end of my draw pile for the start of possibly turn 2, actually. I'm only at 46, right? So I did this very, very fast. And then the idea was I was able to start my turn by drawing Omniscience off the bottom of my draw pile and then reshuffling my deck. So I draw Omniscience and reshuffle my deck, and I look at my draw pile, and what I have to do to win the run from here, I think I'm misremembering this. I'm misremembering this slightly, but the gist is right. Anyway, what I have to do to win the run from here is I have to Omniscience something strong enough to keep me going, and I have to survive next turn somehow. And looking at my draw pile, Panic Button is 6 cards away, and I have no ability to draw an extra card, which means I need to get to Panic Button next turn, so I'm going to have to Omniscience one of the cards between Panic Button and the top of my draw pile, so that it's out of the way so that I can draw Panic Button. Thank you, Frozen Eye. And looking at those 5 cards, it's basically like 4 useless commons that I would never want to Omniscience, and Devotion plus. So I Omniscience Devotion plus. The next turn I play Panic Button to survive, and then the turn after that I am Divine. At the start of the turn I deal 1 trillion damage, I draw a bunch of cards, I set up for the next turn, which I forget, but it's possible that I was Divine in that turn as well. If I played Prey, I might have not been. But basically at that point, you're no longer weak, vulnerable, and frail after turn 2 and 3 of the heart fight. Not that I was frail anyway, thanks to Turnip, but and the heart doesn't actually scale that much, so usually turn 2 and 3 are scary, then 4, 5, 6, and 7 you're pretty safe. And so I was able to leverage all of that to kill the heart. It looks like I had to survive turn 8, which can be a little bit spooky sometimes, but we got there. And that was it. 10 in a row. Pretty insane. And the worst thing about this for me was knowing that the way I had to hit 11 to break the world record was play Ironclad, and I have spent the entire month so far basically just not even paying much attention to my Ironclad runs even. I've been losing way more of them than I'm used to. Rupture has been changed, Hemokinesis has been changed, and I don't really know how I'm meant to adapt to that stuff yet. So I just felt very ill-prepared to play an Ironclad run. And also I'm in the middle of this month where I'm trying to kill over 100 hearts. So it's not like I'm going to take a day to think about it. I just have to go. So the next day I started at 6:36 p.m. I think after my watcher run, which would have ended at 2 a.m. Probably took me quite a few hours to wind down and actually fall asleep, and then I wake up the next day and want to wake up before I get going on this Ironclad run. So I gave myself, you know, there are 16 hours between this run, which is a very large amount of time between runs for me, given what I was doing this month. And we started our Ironclad run, and this one's only an hour and a half because honestly there wasn't that much to think about in it, fortunately. I started with Black Star, which means I want to try to kill elites. There weren't many elites to kill in Act 1 though, unfortunately. But we just go uppercut, shrug it off. I actually took Clash at 10-0 on floor 3. I think people underestimate how good Clash can be in Act 1 elite fights for Ironclad. It's a pretty bad card, but also if you need to get through Act 1 and you're on 3 energy with a Black Star, so you really want to be able to beat elites, having a Clash ain't bad. Took a Pummel and a Flex Potion, took an Iron Wave, just a nice bridge card to keep me alive. We rest, we fight Gremlin Knob. Take 39 damage, unfortunately, get an Ornamental Fan and a Ceramic Fish, and a Power Through, which are not incredible. Power Through is pretty good. Power Through wins you some runs, actually. Upgraded Uppercut, we take the chest before we rest in case we get something like a Regal Pillow or a Dreamcatcher. We got a Happy Flower, so doesn't matter either way here. Purchased a Bronze Scales and an Evolve to go with our Power Through. Got a Feel No Pain as well. At this point, stuff is not going incredibly well or anything. I actually upgraded Iron Wave going into the Guardian fight and then Shrug It Off as well because we need to be able to block against Guardian. But then, boom! We hit Reaper off the Guardian. We get Philo Stones, so we're sitting on 4 energy. Pretty sweet. We get another Power Through, so we're playing a double Power Through Reaper deck with Evolve. This is pretty strong. Second Wind combos incredibly well with Power Through. Very solid. Iron Flame with Reaper. Reaper makes a ton of sense. Omnis Forge is good. Where's Necronomicon? Come on. Cultists hit me pretty hard and I rest again. Take 40 damage from Taskmaster and get Blood Violent, Ink Bottle, and Pummel Strike. Still not going great. Snake Plant doesn't deal us damage though. Smiling Mask, and boom, Necronomicon. So, we have a bit of strength, Necronomicon, and a Reaper, and at this point, basically we've won. I think Reaper is so insanely powerful on Ironclad. Just like gives you free runs. Fiendfire is a pretty funny card to play with Necronomicon. Depending on if you like get like a Dead Branch or a Dark Embrace or something with it, it can get pretty ridiculous. Purchased a Feel No Pain, removed a Pain, upgraded an Inflame, took a bunch of damage from Collector, but got an Exhume to get our Reaper back again. We got a Fusion Hammer, so now we're on 5 energy along with all of this stuff. And draw the rest of the Elephant. There you go. So, that's 11. Yeah, and this was insane, and at this point, I'm like up here at 11-0 rotating. Nobody has ever done this before. It is pretty insane, but also I want to kill more hearts in a month than anybody has ever done before, so I'm not really going to sit around and think super hard about it. I walk into a silent run. I don't have great stuff going on in Act 1, so I go for a Boss Relic swap, which gives me Incense Burner. And I lost to Lagavulin here because I took like 3 damage from Jawworm in order to put Incense Burner on a better number for elite fights. Then walked into the Lagavulin fight and died to exact lethal. And Incense Burner would have been fine without taking the damage to Jawworm. I also used an upgrade potion in the Lagavulin fight, which I believe I used on the wrong turn. But like, at this point, just recounting this happening has exhausted me. It's hard to explain how exhausting it is to spend 5,000 plus hours mastering something on top of decades of playing games like it and gathering experience on those games to get really good at the sort of game this is in general. Reach a point where you are doing something that nobody else has ever done before, and be doing this while playing the game 10 plus hours a day, like not going outside, not sleeping very well. Yeah, this was ridiculous. It was an awesome experience. Glad that it happened. Wasn't that upset when it ended. Pretty incredibly, I actually like won a lot after this. Like, obviously, this isn't like, oh wow, 13-0. There were quite a few losses in there, but like that was another 9 streak, I think. It's only 8. That was quite a lot of wins. Eventually, I like really fell off toward the end of the streak, and I ran a little bit hot right at the end. This ends up being my 13-0, stretching into February. But my 11-0 win streak was right in the middle, I believe, of almost holding 75% win rate over 60 runs, which for me is like, that's also a really cool achievement. It's not something that I was trying to do, so I don't care about it as much. Like, it feels like, given that I did that without trying, I could do even better than that if I had been trying. Whereas with the win streak, it doesn't really feel like I could have done better than I did with the runs I was given. Like, I'm aware that I hit an exhaustion point and just couldn't. I'm surprised that I did as well as I did at all to begin with, really. So, yeah. Yeah, but those runs were really cool. I will always remember, if not the exact details of that Watcher heart fight, I will always remember the vague details of it as just one of the coolest fights that I've ever played. God, I played so many runs. I can't even find the win streak again. There it is. And the month as a whole was great. I like held 60% win rate overall for over 200 runs and ended up at 127 heart kills, which was way better than I was expecting. So, cool stuff. And yeah, I'm definitely gonna end this here. That ended up being a couple of hours of talking, right? So we will take a look at my 13-0 world record next, I guess. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying these.